In the next few minutes, I will show you everything you need to know to use the DJI Action 5 Pro properly. I'll show you what hidden features it has and how to get the most out of the Action 5 Pro. To make this tutorial a little clearer, it's divided into 15 parts that correspond to the most important features of the Action 5 Pro. Before we switch on the Action 5, there are a few things you should know about the body. On the side, there is the power button, which you use to switch on the camera and change the recording mode. On the top is the shutter button, and there is a side door on the left and right that you can open by sliding it up and down. Behind the right door, you will find the USB-C port. You can use this to charge the Action 5 and connect it to a PC. Behind the left door, you will find the battery, which you can simply remove by pulling the tab, and a slot for a micro SD card. It's important to note that you cannot use just any type of SD card with the Action 5. It must be a very fast card with a speed rating of V30. For example, cards from SanDisk, such as the SanDisk Extreme Pro, are very suitable. By the way, you will find a link to all the accessories I mentioned in this video in the video description. But the best thing is that you don't necessarily need an SD card for the Action 5, because it has an internal storage capacity of 47 GB. Apart from that, you should know 3 other important things about the body. The lens cover can be easily removed by turning it to the left. It is therefore very easy to replace should it accidentally get damaged. The side door on the right hand side is also easy to remove. To do this, slide it downwards, open it, and simply push it upwards slightly. This may be necessary if you want to connect an external microphone to the USB port. When you close the side doors, always make sure that no red color is visible, because only then is the door closed correctly and the camera is really waterproof. And that brings us to the third important piece of information. The Action 5 is waterproof up to a depth of 20 meters without any additional housing. However, you should not forget that a hard impact, for example by jumping into the water, could affect the water resistance of the camera. The quick release slots for attaching the camera to the magnetic mount are located on the underside, and the magnetic mount is certainly one of the camera's strengths. In addition to the camera, the packaging also contains a quick release adapter mount. This magnetic adapter mount has a base that is compatible with all GoPro mounts. You can simply place the camera on top and press it in. All you have to do is make sure that the DJI logo is located on the front and that the mount snaps into place completely on both sides, because only then is it securely attached. Once locked in place, you don't need to worry. The mount holds absolutely securely. To remove it, simply press the 2 sides of the adapter mount together at the same time, and the camera can be easily removed. With a little practice, you can even do it with one hand. If you want to take shots for social media, you can also mount the Action 5 vertically, but you will need the frame for this. Remove the Action 5, open the catch of the supplied frame, make sure that the shutter button of the camera is in line with the shutter button of the frame, and slide the camera into the frame from the front. Now close the frame and you can attach the camera together with the frame to the quick release mount. This is not only possible horizontally, but also vertically. The frame has another advantage. It offers additional protection. The back display in particular is better protected by the protruding edge. The accessories in the standard packaging are of course not nearly enough to utilize the full potential of this camera. You should definitely buy a number of mounts for it. To start with, I always recommend a chest mount for POV shots. You can take much better shots with this than with a helmet mount. You need a good pole. I myself use the poles from the competition. For example, this 114 cm long pole from Insta360, or very cool, this multi-mount that you can bend, whereby the pole can then hardly be seen in the shot. For underwater use, you should use a floating hand grip so as not to lose the Action 5. And a handlebar mount for attaching it to poles of different sizes can also be very useful. When you turn on the Action 5 for the first time, you need to connect it to the DJI Mimo App. You can find the app in the iOS App Store or for Android on the DJI homepage. Connect the camera to the app and you can now activate the camera. If there is a new firmware, the app will notify you and you should install it immediately. This is important because DJI has added new features several times in the last few weeks alone by releasing updates. Another strength of the Action 5 is that you can easily control it via the app. As soon as you have connected it, the preview image of the camera appears and you can change all the recording settings here and of course start and stop a recording. The app has a variety of additional features. At the end of this video, I'll show you the most important and interesting features of the app. You shouldn't miss this. But for now, I would like to show you how to operate the camera itself. The Action 5 can not only be operated via the back display, but all functions are also available via the front display. If you swipe sideways, you can change the recording mode. In addition to video, there is also photo, super night mode, subject tracking, slow motion, and time-lapse or hyperlapse. You can also change the mode using the power button, also known as the quick switch button. And the quick switch button has an unusual but interesting feature. You can personalize the modes that appear when you use the quick switch button. For example, you can specify whether the super night mode should appear or not when you press the button. You can also activate a voice output that tells you which mode has just been activated. This is ideal for situations in which you want to switch modes but can't look at the display. I'll show you how to personalize the functions of the quick switch button a little later. If you swipe down from the top, the control menu opens. Swiping up from the bottom opens the recording settings. The icon on the left opens the playback function, the icon on the right the advanced recording settings. And if you tap and hold on the zoom icon, you can zoom in and out. However, I would advise against using this feature because it leads to a digital crop, which reduces the image quality. So which shooting mode should you use? Photo and video are self-explanatory. You should definitely use the super night mode in low light conditions. It is definitely one of the Action 5's greatest strengths, as this mode greatly reduces image noise in low light conditions. This noticeably improves the image quality in these situations. Don't forget that indoor shots should also be considered low light situations, and that you should use the super night mode when shooting indoors. The subject tracking mode is a very special feature of the Action 5 Pro. In this mode, the Action 5 automatically recognizes a subject. This is then highlighted with a yellow frame. The camera then tries to automatically keep the subject in the center of the frame. This means you don't have to pay so much attention to keeping the subject, for example yourself, perfectly in the center at all times. This is achieved by dynamically cropping the image. This is also why the feature is only available in a maximum resolution of 2.7K and therefore in a lower image quality. But it's a cool feature, especially for social media and if you often film yourself. In slow motion mode, a slow motion recording is already created in the camera. As I always edit my videos, I rarely use this feature and slow down my recordings in post myself if necessary. In my opinion, it's much more important to know that you have the choice between a time-lapse and a hyperlapse recording in the last mode on the far right. In both cases, you get an accelerated representation of reality, similar to a highly accelerated video. The difference is that in time-lapse mode you have to use the camera on a tripod, as the recording is not stabilized here. In hyperlapse mode, on the other hand, you can move around with the camera and the recording is then stabilized by the camera. You can achieve very cool results with both recording modes. But in most cases, you will use the standard video mode. That is why I will now show you which settings you should use in this mode to achieve the best possible results. The resolution and frame rate are very important. On the Action 5, I would generally always recommend the highest resolution of 4K. A standard video file has a format of 16:9. The format of 4:3 leads to black bars on the left and right sides, but the field of view at the top and bottom is enlarged. 4:3 can therefore be an advantage if you want to be able to crop your video a bit more flexibly in post. This is suitable for POV shots, for example, or if you want to use the camera on a drone. For a standard video format, however, you always have to crop your recordings. Personally, I usually use the standard format of 16:9. The frame rate determines how many images per second are captured. The more images per second, the smoother a recording looks. For a particularly natural and fluid look, I would recommend 60 frames per second. This is therefore also the frame rate that I would usually recommend for sports or nature shots. A very low frame rate of 24 or 25 frames per second, on the other hand, is considered particularly cinematic because this is the frame rate used for professional movies. But if there is a lot of movement, such a low frame rate can lead to a very choppy look, especially if you don't use ND filters. I also think that an action camera is not usually about creating a particularly cinematic look. Rather, you want to capture nature and your experiences as naturally as possible, and a higher frame rate is better suited to this. In low light conditions, on the other hand, you should favor a low frame rate as the camera has more time to capture light. In these cases, you should therefore use a maximum frame rate of 30 frames per second. And don't forget to use the super night mode in these situations. If you're not sure what frame rate to use at the beginning, you can set 30 frames per second as a default to start with. This is never wrong. For slow motion, I recommend 4K with 120 frames per second. You can achieve very cool results with these settings. But don't forget that if you don't use the slow motion mode, you still have to slow down the recording in post yourself. On the other hand, I would rather not use a setting of 240 frames per second, as in this case the image quality decreases significantly, also because you have to reduce the resolution to 1080. The Action 5 offers excellent image stabilization. It works extremely well, already in the standard setting. Rocksteady Plus is an even improved version of the Rocksteady stabilization, but it also results in a very strong crop of the image. This is also true for horizon balancing. This feature additionally ensures that the horizon always remains straight, no matter how you turn the camera, but this only applies to a maximum rotation of 45 degrees. If you reduce the resolution to 2.7K, you can also activate Horizon Steady. In this case, the horizon remains straight, even if you rotate the camera completely by 360 degrees. Since both Rocksteady Plus and Horizon Balancing lead to a strong crop, and I like the particularly wide field of view of the Action 5, I prefer the standard Rocksteady stabilization, which is usually completely sufficient. The standard field of view of the Action 5 is D-Warp. The Action 5 has a fisheye lens, which leads to relatively strong distortions. In the setting D-Warp, these distortions are partially removed. However, the field of view is somewhat smaller than in the other settings. The actual field of view of the lens corresponds more to the setting wide. DJI recommends this setting especially underwater. Personally, I'm a big fan of ultra-wide, the widest field of view of the Action 5 Pro. Although it has the strongest distortions, it also has a significantly larger field of view, especially at the top and bottom edges. That's why ultra-wide is particularly suitable for POV shots, for example when shooting with the chest mount or the helmet mount, or even if you are filming yourself with the pole, as I'm doing here when skiing. Apart from these basic settings, you can also customize the capture settings in more detail to suit your needs. For the additional recording settings, tap the settings icon on the right hand side. And for the best possible results, you should definitely be familiar with a few features here. You need to activate the Pro mode for most of the features. Here you can even set the exposure and white balance completely manually, but I only do this very rarely on an action camera. What is interesting, however, is that you can adjust the exposure slightly up or down in the exposure menu in automatic mode. This way the automatic mode will expose your shot a little brighter or darker. Depending on the situation, this can be very useful. For example, to prevent certain areas in the image from burning out and appearing too bright. To avoid this, you should correct the exposure slightly downwards. Although it should be noted that the Action 5 only very rarely leads to burnt out highlights. If on the other hand you want to edit the colors of your shots, you should take a closer look at the color settings. For strong color grading, it's a great advantage if your recording has a color depth of 10-bit, because in these cases the recordings have significantly more color gradations. HLG 10-bit has the advantage that the image has significantly higher brightness values. This means that very bright areas in the image can be displayed much brighter. However, whether this feature is useful depends on whether the screen on which you are watching your videos can also display the higher brightness values. For example, newer iPhones or other smartphones are able to do this, as are modern TVs. Try it out, the recordings will have much more contrast and look very cool. You should activate the color profile D-Log M 10-bit if you want to heavily edit the colors of your recordings and create your own look. This is a 10-bit color profile with low contrast and saturation, which is very suitable for color grading. But remember, if you use this profile, you will need to edit the colors of each shot in post. DJI offers a LUT for free download on their homepage. With this LUT, you can convert a log shot into a shot with a standard look with just a few clicks. And you should also use this LUT if you are recording with D-Log M. If you activate color recovery here on the left, contrast and saturation will be added to the preview image to give you an idea of what the shot will look like. In low light conditions, the Action 5 will reduce the shutter speed to capture more light. This leads to more motion blur and poorer image stabilization. If you experience difficult lighting conditions during sports or when shooting action, you should activate Sport under stabilization here on the right. The shutter speed then will always be kept high and you will avoid jerks in your recording if the lighting conditions are poor. Of course, this feature is also available in Super Night mode. And here at the bottom left, you can see another very useful feature, image adjustment. You can use image adjustment to influence the strength of the noise reduction and the digital sharpness of the shot. These small action cameras cameras tend to add a lot of digital sharpness. The contrasts of the edges are artificially increased. The image gets a more digital look. DJI now calls this texture. You should reduce the texture slightly, especially for a more cinematic and natural look. But be careful, at -2 the image could look very soft and it might be necessary to add some sharpness in post. I usually leave the noise reduction at 0. The Action 5 has 2 additional recording modes, which are hidden here in the settings menu. If you tap on the camera icon at the top left, you can activate the features pre-recording and loop recording. In the case of loop recording, the Action 5 will record in a continuous loop and only store the last few minutes after the recording has stopped. You can use this if you want to use your Action 5 as a dashcam or body cam. Pre-recording is also designed to prevent you from missing an important moment. In this mode, the Action 5 also captures a certain period of time before you press the shutter button. For example, the 5 or 10 seconds before you press the shutter button. This is very useful for fishing, for example. Of course, this requires the camera to record constantly and continuously, and this consumes a lot of energy. Therefore, only use this feature when you really need it. Now you know almost everything you need to know to take great shots with the Action 5 Pro. But there are still a few very interesting settings that can improve and facilitate the operation of the Action 5 Pro. To do this, open the control menu. Here you can activate the orientation lock and prevent the camera from unintentionally switching to portrait mode. This is very useful, especially if you are using the camera on a pole, as the camera normally automatically switches to portrait orientation when you turn it sideways. Here you can activate the screen lock or voice control. The Action 5 recognizes the voice commands start recording, stop recording, take photo and shut down. You can set whether the front display should show the preview image in a 16:9 format or whether it should utilize the whole screen. But I find the first 2 features in the top left hand corner particularly interesting. The first icon allows you to create your own preset. Simply tap on the plus and the current camera settings will be saved in a new preset. Your preset is now also displayed in the menu with the recording modes. As I told you, you can also switch the modes using the quick switch button on the side. And it's precisely the functionality of this button that you can customize here via this menu. In other words, whether there should be a voice output or which mode can be accessed using the button. You can even assign a completely different function to the button, such as activating the lock screen by pressing the button. You can use this icon to adjust the brightness of the screen, and you can open the general camera menu here. As you can see, this menu also contains a number of settings options. For example, you can connect a wireless microphone here, for example a DJI Mic 2, activate the new boost lens, adjust the volume of the sounds, or set a time code when using multiple cameras. But in my opinion, 3 features in this menu are particularly important and useful for all users. Snapshot stands for the function that when the camera is switched off and you press the shutter button, a recording is started immediately. This saves time if you want to quickly start a recording. Here you can specify what type of recording it should be. For example, a recording with the last settings. Generally always a video recording or a hyperlapse recording and so on. The DJI Action 5 Pro is the only action camera that has an integrated pressure gauge which displays the altitude when hiking or the depth when diving. You can activate this feature here. When diving, you can even set the camera to automatically start recording as soon as you reach a certain depth. The Action 5 was initially criticized for only using a low bitrate. If you want to ensure that the camera stores as much information as possible to guarantee the best possible image quality, you should set the bitrate to high. This is the only way to achieve the best possible image quality with the Action 5 Pro, even if you will admittedly very often not see any difference with a lower bitrate, and a high bitrate also leads to larger files. So if you need to save storage space, you can also set the bitrate to standard. The recordings will often look the same. As I told you at the beginning, the Action 5 Pro has an internal memory and you can also use an SD card to store your clips. If you now swipe to the left in the control menu, you can manage your storage. Here you can select the location on which your recordings are to be saved, and you can format both the SD card and the internal memory under storage on the right. There are several ways in which you can transfer your files. Directly via the SD card, of course, but you can also connect the camera to your PC via USB-C and transfer recordings from the internal memory. Or you can download your recordings to your smartphone via the Mimo app. And in the Mimo app, I would now like to show you 3 very interesting and useful features: an AI editor, dashboard, and the invisible selfie stick effect. As soon as you have connected your Action 5 to the Mimo app, you can see your recordings under Album. If you select a shot, you can edit it here, shorten it, change the colors, and so on. There are two particularly interesting features here. With Dashboard, you can add a range of information to your recordings, such as altitude, date and time, and if you are using a remote, a Garmin or Apple Health, you can import and display additional sports data. But you will need the aforementioned accessories for this, as the Action 5 Pro does not have GPS internally. And with InvisiStick, you can remove the selfie stick from your recording, albeit only in a reduced quality. If you select cloud processing here, a resolution of 1080 is available. The recordings must be uploaded for this, and apart from the reduced quality, this works relatively well. Under Editor and New Project, you can select several clips and a fully fledged editing tool is available to you. If you don't feel like putting your recordings together into a video yourself, you can use the AI editor. It's called One Tap Edit. You select a few clips. This only works with clips already downloaded to the smartphone. Tap Next, and the app creates a clip with music and effects, fully automatically. At the bottom, you can select a template or change the music or the text. An absolutely cool feature, so try it out. I think you now know everything you need to get the best out of this camera, so give me a like as feedback if the video was interesting for you. There will be more videos on the Action 5 Pro, so stay tuned and see you next time.